Buddy, it's Comic Crack. I'm going to take a look at a book right away, but I wanted to give my shout outs to Mr. Eddie Van Halen. In front of you, you're looking at what I think is their absolutely best album, Fair Warning. And when I was reading about this today, this is my OG cassette from when I was a young teenage crackhead. When I was reading about this album today, I was reading about the cover artist, and it turns out that the cover artist is a guy named William Kurelek from 1927. He was born 1927, died 1977. He grew up on a farm in the prairies here in Canada, and at an early age actually moved to Winnipeg. So he lived in Winnipeg for a number of years. Later on in his life, he had some psychological problems, and it was deemed that he was it sorry, one second here. Schizophrenia. He received treatment for schizophrenia while he was in the hospital. He was given a place to paint and kind of create art, and he created this piece that this image is taken from. Of it's a head. It's supposed to be his head with the back cut off, and all these little compartments inside his head with all of these traumatic things from his childhood playing out within his brain. And when he, it was called The Maze, is what it was called. Eventually, when he got out of the hospital and kind of, was feeling better and kind of less morbid, I guess, he did another painting called Out of the Maze, which is him, his wife, and kids sitting in a prairie field, having a picnic. In the foreground, you can see a skull, and then in the background, it looks like there's a storm coming towards them as they sit and kind of enjoy this moment of peace. So that was super cool to find that out, the connection to Winnipeg here. It's the way that it goes. But Eddie Van Halen and Van Halen in general, such an influence. I was a huge, huge fan. I've still got the tapes. This is the only one I bought on vinyl. I know I have the CD somewhere. I couldn't find it for this video. Like I said, I think it's their best one. And the two killer tracks at the end, Sunday Afternoon in the Park, that leads to One Foot Out the Door. It's fucking phenomenal. Yeah, so there you go. Rest in peace. And now on to the task at hand here. So, today we're going to look at Promethean Enterprises. This is issue number 5, what turned out to be the final issue of this kind of underground fanzine. We get a Robert Williams cover here that folds out. And I was looking online to have a look to see, how accessible the first issues are. They are out there on eBay, but they go for, I think I saw one of the early issues for about $900. I think it was up for auction for. So not that easy to find. This one is a reasonable price. This seems to be the one that's, I'm guessing that there was a higher print run on this one, although I haven't looked at those numbers. What an issue. Really a fantastic issue. I absolutely loved this. I just finished reading it. A lot of good things about it, so we'll go through it. So the main meat of this is about a 30-page Robert Crumb interview. It was done the interview was done just after XYZ Comics came out by Crumb. Looking at a potentially a first printing here. I have a question mark on the back, so that usually means that there's some things with the first and second printing that it's a little more difficult to discern which printing you have, so that's why I have a question mark there. But this is what he was doing, and they talk briefly about it. They talk about this Cubist Bebop comics, and the other one that they end up talking about, because they discuss his Keep On Trucking and Mr. Natural, and all the merchandise that was out there that he wasn't really getting much from. He says in the interview. Here we go. So there's a Keep On Trucking strip here where he kind of mocks the entire thing, and at the end talks about make sure that you buy all the merch: t-shirts, cigarette papers, baseball caps, bath mats, beach towels, etc., bumper stickers, etc., etc., etc. So I haven't read a ton of interviews with Crumb. It's nice to get a snapshot right from this time. So again, 1973, 1974. It's really great to get a snapshot of this time, of things that he was thinking about and discussions they were having. They talk about Fritz the Cat movie. They talk about his beginnings doing fanzines and things, and just kind of what it was like for him growing up, and then his kind of transition to becoming the underground comics grandpappy. Loved it. I don't think that there's, for those of you who maybe have read a bunch of Crumb interviews, I don't know if there's a ton of stuff in here that you wouldn't have already heard, but we'll go through kind of a bit of it here and we'll talk about some of it. So one of the themes that runs through the entire article is his perpetual, he doesn't seem to be able to say no and actually walk away from stuff. He seems to get roped into these various endeavors, whether it's doing an interview for a magazine or doing some art for a publication or doing somebody a favor. That comes across a lot, and it just seems like he's one of those guys that just didn't necessarily, not that he had horrible business sense, not by any stretch, but it feels like he didn't have the ability always to kind of take control. So there's a lot of things he talks about. It also might just be Crumb himself. It seems to be the way his personality is, where he kind of is embarrassed and downplays some of the stuff and talks about what a horrible decision things were. So that was interesting to hear, even though it was a tiny bit frustrating. You kind of want, you get into these stories and it just seems like time after time after time there's these artists that are just getting taken advantage of. One of the bonuses, we'll talk about it actually when we get there. We'll hold that thought. As I try to sort of read upside down and glean, the one time I decided not to take notes. So just talking about meeting Harvey Kurtzman and the kind of work that he was going to do with him. Harvey Kurtzman was trying to get him involved in various endeavors. He tried to get him to do some rendering for Little Annie Fanny, but Crumb just couldn't pull it off. And he just talks about how Kurtzman was a really good influence on him because he was just straightforward and honest with him, basically saying, like, you've got a hell of a lot of talent. It's maybe not in this rendering side of things, so was very frank with him and kind of not quite took him under his wing, but I think they just enjoyed each other's company. At one point, Kurtzman takes him to Playboy to meet Hugh Hefner because they've offered him a gig. I'm not sure if it was like the late 60s, like 69, 70, 71, right around there. I'm not exactly sure of the date. I don't remember. But at that time, they were going to offer him $500 a page to do a strip for Playboy. And he basically told them to go fuck themselves. He went to the Playboy mansion and told the woman that was in charge of the kind of the comic section to stick it up her ass, basically. To which, I guess, from what he says, she responded that, you just wait until the bottom falls out of these underground comics and you go nowhere, etc., etc. One of those classic kind of stories. I think his biggest thing was that they wanted to censor a lot of the stuff that he did. And I think especially at that time, it seems like he was just sick of it. Sick of having to kind of not have the voice that he wanted to have, and people telling him that he could or couldn't do certain things, right? And as is what usually happens in these, there's talk of Zap Comics talking about issue 1. He talks about issue 0 as well, and again, the story that I think is one of the most well-known. I didn't pull out issue 0 for some reason, I'm not sure why. That issue 0 was supposed to be issue 1. He sent off the art, sent off everything to get printed up, and it never got returned. So they came out with issue number 1. He finally got his hands back on that stuff and put out issue number 0. He also talks about meeting S. Clay Wilson, who everybody refers to just as Wilson, and just kind of what that was like for him. This guy coming in, bursting into the room and with a bottle of whiskey and just pouring all this art out to him. And Crumb was just blown away by what he was seeing, hadn't really seen anything like it. So then Wilson's first appearance is here in issue number 2, and we'll have a look at it. It's worth having a quick look at because it's quite a bit different than kind of what he gets known for. Oh, I guess the other thing I should say that I meant to say at the beginning of this is that this video will be incredibly not safe for work. Some of the stuff that we're going to see lately or later on, or potentially right now even, absolutely watch your surroundings when you're watching this video. So here we go, the Hog Riding Fools. So Checker Demon is in this one. I mean, it's still very, very clearly his style, but it's not as manic and wild as kind of what you see from him later on. Still great. Sorry, Lillian has some tattoo pens, so that's what you're seeing flashing on my hand here as it pokes in and out of the screen. Really, really great to see. And that's the other good thing about going through this stuff, pulling the comics out of the boxes and having a look while they're kind of discussing the issues themselves, just kind of flipping through the book to kind of put yourself in that time. So there's a Checkered Demon there. He talks about when he worked at, I think it was at the greeting card company, one of his gigs there was to do a little a comic strip for their kind of in-house, I don't know, flyer, newspaper. I'm not exactly sure what you would call it. So he created this character, Roberta Smith, office girl, and it kind of started out pretty generic, but then he got to a point where he started injecting some real people from the office, changing their names, but it was still very clear of who he was talking about. He got in quite a bit of shit for it there. Ended up quitting that job. And again, seems to be a theme of, you know, just how far he goes with stuff and just walks away from things as well too. Dips his toes in when it's necessary. That's the one thing that I will say about him. I mean, I've talked about it before. Like, I love Crumb's work. I think he's immensely important in the world of underground comics and in return for independent comics. There's no doubt in my mind. I totally understand why modern day comic conventions and people would just want to write him out of the history books. I totally understand it. There's some incredibly offensive and ignorant shit. And he even says a couple of things in here that we won't really focus on that are just extremely ignorant. But I will say that that's one of the things that made this stuff so groundbreaking, is that these individuals were speaking their mind. They weren't working for a big company. They were very, very adamant on doing their own thing and not working for a company where they were going to be restricted, going out there on their own, trying and sometimes failing, and obviously in Crumb's case, succeeding quite a bit. He talks about some of the trouble that he got into. Yeah, so in here he's talking about the trouble that he got into with a couple of books. I don't have Snatch number 1, but one of them that I do have is Zap Comics number 4. They got into a lot of trouble for this one. Flipping through it again and reminding myself, of course, and it's, from what I remember, it was mainly to do with this story. I imagine there was other stuff in here. It's called Joe Blow, and it's basically about a family who, just an incestuous family. So the father having sex with the daughter, the mother having sex with the son, and at the end of the strip, the brother and sister going off into the sunset to do some more exploration. That said, again, these guys were doing this thing. They were cleansing their id. They were just letting things go. That was kind of the whole point. But I think that was one of the ones that went really, really far and got them some heat. Got them so much heat, I think, that some of the head shops weren't carrying the books. The other one that I pulled out, I've got a really rough copy of Snatch number 2, totally separated from the staples. And again, I mean, I'm not saying I agree with this imagery. It's just a fact that this is what he was doing. This is the kind of stuff that he was doing. This is what underground comics were, so, and this one is just completely, every single page is just completely filthy. He also talks about a fire that took out a lot of the original art. Some of the original art that was destroyed was Rory Hayes' work as well. Yeah, so interesting. And kind of the idea, he also talks about the idea for Snatch Comics, having these little dirty books. They were modeled after books that existed like this, same size, everything. So he talks a little bit about there. He doesn't go into, they don't spend a ton of time on like lawsuits, etc. They do talk about it, but they don't spend a ton of time on it. And then finally, well, not finally, I guess the next thing that he talks about, I guess backing up to Zap, one of the other things that happened was, yeah. So Victor Moscoso, who worked in kind of rock posters, had experience getting his shit ripped off. So when they were talking about doing Zap and Print Mint was going to do it, it was Moscoso who said, we need to get a lawyer. We need to have something written up. We need to take care of ourselves. So he really pushed them because, and Crumb fully admits himself here that he was kind of overjoyed. Somebody wanted to print Zap. That's great. They would take care of this. They'd take care of that. They'd take care of the distribution, all the stuff that he didn't want to take care of, and thought like, this will be so fantastic. It'll be a great relationship. And Moscoso was really adamant of, again, right from Crumb's mouth, saying that Moscoso was really adamant of, we need to make sure that we fucking write something down and we get a lawyer to put something in writing so this relationship can be very firm and very clear. So good on him. I guess one of the upsides, especially at that time, and I guess maybe at any time, being involved with an anthology and being involved with a group of artists, that idea of everybody having their own strengths to be able to contribute to everybody else. Yeah, so they spend some time with that, and then they start talking about Fritz the Cat. And it's interesting, on the Kayfabe channel, when they talk to Bakshi, Bakshi says that, hey man, Crumb didn't like it, that's fine. It's not like he didn't get money out of the deal. He made out very well. Crumb says a completely different story in here, and I know that that's been something that's maybe a little bit back and forth. The thing is, as I'm reading this, as much as I love Bakshi, and I really do love Bakshi a lot, the thing that Crumb says in here that resonates with me a little bit more is that, they deal with things differently in Hollywood. Like when they finally approached me to use the Fritz the Cat character, they already had model sheets. They had already started on animation. The project was already underway, even though it wasn't kind of greenlit, I guess is the term we would use now. I don't know what term he uses there. They still hadn't kind of got the funding and gotten the okay to go for it, so And he just clearly talks about, what it's like dealing with people in Hollywood and how fucking scummy it is. And he has nothing good to say about Bakshi at all. Not about his talent. He feels he's talentless. Yeah, zero to say that's positive about Bakshi and that entire experience. And then he does end up talking about the Fritz the Cat character, and just, at the time of this, he hadn't written this yet, but he talks about, I'm thinking of doing a strip where I just kill off Fritz. He's just become so kind of ingrained into the Hollywood system, and a drug addict, and just treating people like garbage. So I think that's what eventually I'll do. So this is the People's Comics, and this one is a first printing, so it's this story here, so 1972. So the timeline for this is a little strange. This was recorded, this interview was transcribed or recorded or done just after XYZ had come out, but like a year before this magazine had come out, at least. So that's why you're seeing these kind of differences with the years here. So here's the Fritz the Cat strip, where he just fucking offs him, as Fritz is kind of making deals, having sex with a bunch of women, looking at himself in the mirror, long hard look, until finally he fucks with the wrong woman, and she comes up behind him outside and ice pick to the back of his head, and that's it. Fritz is done for. So I mean, if that's not a clear statement of what he felt about the Fritz the Cat movie, I don't know what else is. So then the middle section, we come to a bunch of comics, and overall incredible, and one specifically fucking blew my mind. It's so good. We get some Frank Brunner pieces in here. Then we get Metzger, I want to say Randy Metzger, with I think this was part 3 of a story here, and it's oh yeah, chapter 3 says right there. It's fine, there's nothing wrong with it. It didn't kind of grab my attention. The couple of things that did grab my attention, though, I'm just going to flip past just to give you a sense of what's here. Here we go. So is this here? So in November of 1971, San Francisco municipal bus riders received an unprecedented, an unexpected treat. Instead of the usual advertising, they got a comic strip, I guess. They got some art. Sorry, I'm going to turn this around here so I'm trying to read it upside down, but instead of the usual advertising placards pushing Wrigley's gum, toothpaste, the local army recruitment, the Lucky Riders were bombarded with an advertisement for KSAN radio that occupied all of the advertising space in 100 municipal buses. The treat was that KSAN ad was actually a 60-foot loop by artist Victor Moscoso, beginning just to the right of the front door of the bus, and then kind of taking them around the bus to end again at the front. And I showed this off. I'm going to try to show it off the best that I can in this. It's absolutely incredible. Would have been a real treat to see. I don't know how I'm going to do this here. Anyway, so you get the insert, and then both the flaps pop out, and you get the entire thing. And they say, the usual, buy 2 copies. One of them, cut out this insert and paste it around your room so you can get the full effect. And there you go. There's the entire thing there. KSAN. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. So that was amazing enough. And then I turned the page and I met with Bob Inwood. And it's dated 1970. I had a look on Comics Joint afterwards, and the information that they had for this magazine on Comics Joint is that at the time of writing it, he didn't think that this was continued anywhere, which is so unfortunate because this is a hell of a story. So 18th century Russia, and we get a werewolf story. And at first, kind of like, okay, no big deal. You know, some beautiful illustration, really, really great kind of landscapes. And then you just get into, first one of the dogs is eaten in the middle of the night, and she kind of has a little bit of a sense of what's going on. And then unfortunately the second dog that she had is eaten in the middle of the night. And she retreats to her room to find some comfort with her kids, and they end up playing together. And then she's going to hang out with, I believe it's her husband. The Count awaits you at dinner. So she sits with him for a little bit and then wants to go to read and starts to drift off to sleep. And like, that panel is fucking beautiful. All of this stuff here is beautiful. And I mean, spoiler alert, we're just going to go for it. She starts hearing some noises, and lo and behold, as she creeps through, she sees the Count and two other people transforming into werewolves, and this entire page is amazing. Like, look at this lighting coming out here. And immediately she thinks of her children, and wouldn't you fucking know it, they up the stairs and they go and get the children. And honestly, as I was reading it, I expected it, but I didn't expect it actually to happen. So I think I made an audible sound when I flipped the page and saw this carnage here. And then finally she comes out of it, and she's in the bar kind of telling the story, and it says to be concluded next issue. And we get no conclusion, and I'm so disappointed that this didn't make it anywhere else, because I absolutely loved it. So that's a name I'm going to do some more digging. I'm sure I've got some more of his stuff. We get a Trina Robbins. We get Travels with Myron. Ted Richards, am I right? Where am I here? Sorry, no. Myron Moose. Vince Davis. Looking a little Ted Richards-ish. And then we're back to the Crumb interview for the last little bit, and it just kind of wraps up everything that they were talking about. And again, they talk about Snatch Comics again. They do kind of bring up Fritz the Cat again for a little bit, and just talking about what he's going to do and where he's going to go with his career and those sort of things. And again, talks about, this is where he goes into detail about the Playboy Mansion and tells that story about going to the mansion and it being just a very strange thing. He was excited about it at first, but then kind of when he was in it, it wasn't, it just became more depressing, and he kind of was embarrassed a little bit for the way Kurtzman was behaving in that environment. He just felt like he saw a bit of a different side, and like that Hugh Hefner was really put on this pedestal, and Crumb says that he didn't understand why. We get a really nice strip as well here too, Bob Condon and illustrated by Robert Crumb, just about kids growing up, making some money to go to see the matinees, go to see the movies, and how they made their money, walking women home from the store, with their shopping when it was raining, so they could make a couple of pennies there, going to the baseball stadium to run the turnstile for people to get in the doors, make some money there, watch people's cars, etc., all just to make some money to go to the movies. Really, really nice one. And then we just wrap up, basically. That's about it. Oh, and at the end, yeah, that was the other thing here. Some fantastic art, And boy, I'm so bad with names that I need to keep doing this. I'm going to need to turn it over here, people. Sorry. Kitchen Safety by Bob Zoell, Zoell. And I had a look on Comics Joint for his work, and there's a couple of comics that I do recognize. I don't have any of them, unfortunately, but I love this a lot. It's really, really beautiful. Beautiful looking stuff, these 2 pages here. And then just a little bit of talk about everybody that's involved, and you know, we don't know if we're going to make it to a next issue, but don't count us out. And you can order some book plates, which immediately I looked online to see if there was any evidence of these out there. I couldn't find anything. 30 book plates for $1. You can either get 30 of one of them, so like a Robert Williams, there's a Crumb one, etc., or you can get 5 of each, so $1 for all of those book plates. And then that's it. Alex Nino on the back there with a beautiful cover. So an amazing document here. I am in love with this. This was a really fun read. So if you see this, and another highly recommended book, if you see this on your outings, I'd say go for it if you have any sort of a passing interest in reading a really great interview with Crumb. It's well worth the money. And like I said, that werewolf story alone, even if it was just a zine and that was the only thing out of it that was really killer, I would still say buy it. Thanks very much, everybody, and we'll talk to you.